My name is Jasper, and at 22, I graduated from MIT with highest honors. 4 years ago, my parents told me they couldn't afford my Stanford tuition while I watched them buy my younger brother Noah a brand new truck. So I disappeared with a full scholarship to MIT instead. No calls, no visits. I built my life alone. Today at graduation, I walked past my mother as she begged the dean for my whereabouts. The look on her face when she saw me in my cap and gown was worth every struggle. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever had to prove your worth to people who should have believed in you from the start. I grew up in what most would consider a typical middle-class American family in suburban Connecticut. My father, Richard, worked as a structural engineer at a respected firm in the city. My mother, Deborah, was an accountant at a local company. We lived in a comfortable 4-bedroom house with a decent yard in a good school district. From the outside looking in, everything seemed perfect. My brother Noah is 4 years younger than me. From the day he was born, there was something special about the way my parents treated him. At first, I thought it was normal. He was the baby of the family after all. But as the years passed, the patterns became more obvious. Noah got new clothes while I got hand-me-downs from cousins. When Noah struggled with a C in math, my parents hired a private tutor. When I got an A- in physics, my father simply told me to work harder next time. Still, I never resented my brother. Noah was a good kid with a friendly personality. He played baseball and had lots of friends. I was quieter, more academic. I joined the science club and the debate team. We were just different, and I accepted that my parents might find it easier to connect with Noah's outgoing nature than my reserved one. Throughout elementary and middle school, I threw myself into academics. I consistently brought home straight A's, won the regional science fair 3 years in a row, and even published an article in a youth science magazine when I was 14. My teachers called me gifted. My parents nodded politely at teacher conferences, but rarely made much fuss about my achievements at home. Academics just come easy to you, my mom would say whenever I showed her a perfect test score. There was always an underlying message. My achievements required less celebration because they were expected. Meanwhile, when Noah hit his first home run in Little League, my parents took the whole family out for ice cream and put the baseball on display in our living room. Despite this, I never stopped trying to make them proud. Stanford University became my dream when I was 15. I visited the campus during a school trip and fell in love with everything about it. The beautiful grounds, the prestigious engineering program, the innovation happening in every corner. I knew it was where I belonged. If you keep your grades up and get a scholarship, we'll help with the rest. My father had promised one night at dinner after I mentioned Stanford, "We've been saving for both you boys to go to college." Those words became my motivation. Through my high school years, I maintained a perfect 4 gigapascals. I became president of the robotics club, volunteered teaching computer skills to seniors at the local community center, and worked summers at the library to save what little I could. Every decision I made was calculated to strengthen my Stanford application. By senior year, my guidance counselor, Miss Brennan, told me I was a strong candidate. "Your application is outstanding, Jasper," she said during one of our meetings. "I think Stanford would be lucky to have you." When the acceptance letter finally arrived in March of my senior year, I felt like all my hard work had paid off. The thick envelope contained not just an acceptance, but also a partial merit scholarship covering about 30% of the tuition. It wasn't a full ride, but it was something. I still needed significant financial help, but I remembered my father's promise. That evening, I carefully placed the acceptance letter on the kitchen table before dinner. I wanted my family to see it right away. I imagined their reactions, my mother's proud tears, my father's firm handshake, maybe even Noah's congratulations. I had finally achieved something that even they couldn't downplay. I spent extra time getting ready, putting on my best shirt, trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. This was the moment I had been working toward for years. As I heard my parents' cars pull into the driveway one after another, I took a deep breath and went downstairs to join them for what I thought would be one of the happiest dinners of my life. "Stanford," my mother said, glancing at the letter as she served the lasagna she had picked up from the grocery store deli. "That's in California, right?" My father picked up the letter, scanned it briefly, and set it aside. "We'll need to talk about this after dinner," was all he said before asking Noah about his baseball practice. The excitement I had felt all day began to deflate. But I told myself they probably wanted to discuss it properly after we ate. Maybe they were planning something special. Maybe they wanted to give the moment the attention it deserved. So I waited, picking at my food, answering occasional questions about school, watching as Noah dominated the conversation with stories about his friends and the upcoming baseball season. I kept waiting for someone to bring up Stanford again, but no one did. After dinner, while Noah went to his room to play video games, my parents asked me to join them in the living room. My father sat in his usual recliner, while my mother perched on the edge of the sofa. I sat across from them, still clinging to hope that they were about to celebrate my achievement. "Jasper," my father began, his voice serious, "Stanford is a prestigious school, and we're proud that you got accepted." My mother nodded. "Very proud," she echoed, but her smile seemed strained. "But we need to discuss the financial aspect," my father continued. "Have you seen how much the tuition is?" I nodded. "About $60,000 per year, including room and board. But I got a scholarship for about $18,000. I added quickly. "And I can work part-time while studying." My father shook his head. "Even with the scholarship, that leaves $42,000 per year. For 4 years. We just can't afford that right now, honey," my mother said, reaching out to pat my knee. "Your father and I have been looking at our finances, and it's just not possible." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "But you said you've been saving for college. You promised." My father cleared his throat. "We did save some, but there have been setbacks. My investments didn't perform as expected last year, and we had to replace the roof last summer, which took a big chunk of our savings. Plus, we need to think about retirement," my mother added. "We're not getting any younger, and financial advisors always say not to sacrifice retirement for college funds." I stared at them, trying to process what they were saying. "So, what am I supposed to do? This is Stanford. This is everything I've been working for. There are other options," my father said firmly. "The state university is excellent and much more affordable. Or you could do 2 years at community college and transfer." "But Stanford offered me a spot in their special engineering program," I protested, my voice rising slightly. "Do you know how competitive that is? People would kill for this opportunity." "We understand it's disappointing," my mother said, "but sometimes life doesn't work out the way we plan. You're smart, Jasper. You'll succeed wherever you go." The conversation continued for almost an hour. I brought up student loans, but my father dismissed the idea of starting life in debt. I suggested taking a gap year to work and save money, but my mother worried I might not go back to school. Every alternative I proposed was shot down. By the end of the discussion, it was clear. They weren't going to help me with Stanford, the dream I had pursued for years. The goal that had driven every decision I'd made throughout high school suddenly seemed unreachable. That night, I barely slept. I stared at my ceiling, calculating and recalculating numbers, trying to figure out how I could possibly make this work on my own. Even with my savings from library work, even if I got a full-time summer job and worked maximum hours during school, even with the largest student loans I could qualify for, the math just didn't add up. The next morning, I dragged myself to school, feeling like I was moving through fog. During lunch, I found myself in Miss Brennan's office, explaining my situation. "I'm so sorry, Jasper," she said, genuine concern in her eyes. "Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think. But don't give up yet. Let's explore all options." Miss Brennan helped me search for additional scholarships and grants. We filled out application after application. Some were for small amounts, $500 here, $1,000 there, but every bit would help. She also suggested I write directly to Stanford's financial aid office, explaining my situation and requesting a review. "Sometimes they can offer more assistance when they know the circumstances," she explained. "It's worth trying." After school, I stopped by the local library where I had worked previous summers. The head librarian, Mrs. Collins, was happy to offer me my old position with additional hours. I also applied at the coffee shop near our house, securing a weekend job that would start immediately. For the next few weeks, I lived on a strict schedule: school, library work, coffee shop on weekends, and every spare minute spent applying for scholarships or researching financial aid options. I cut back on sleep, skipped social events, and ate the cheapest meals possible to save every penny. My parents noticed my exhaustion, but seemed to interpret it as acceptance of my situation. "You'll see, the state university will be a great fit for you," my mother said one evening as I gulped down dinner before rushing to my coffee shop shift. I didn't argue anymore. I simply nodded and continued with my plan to somehow make Stanford work. The rejection I felt was still raw, but it was gradually being replaced by determination. If my parents wouldn't help me reach my dream, I would find another way. 2 months after my Stanford acceptance, on a rare Saturday when I wasn't working, I came downstairs to grab a snack before returning to my scholarship applications. As I approached the kitchen, I heard my parents' voices. They were discussing something in low, excited tones. I paused in the hallway, not intending to eavesdrop. But then I heard Noah's name. "The Ford dealership has that F-150 model he wants," my father was saying. "The salesman said they could do 0% financing for the first year if we put 20% down. $40,000 is still a lot for a first car," my mother replied. But she didn't sound opposed to the idea. "Though, I suppose it would last him through college and beyond. It's an investment in his future," my father said firmly. "He'll need reliable transportation for school and eventually work. And the safety features on the newer models are worth the extra cost." I stood frozen in the hallway, the blood rushing in my ears. $40,000 for a truck, for my 17-year-old brother who had just gotten his license 3 months ago, while they couldn't afford to help with my college tuition. Without thinking, I stepped into the kitchen. My parents looked up, startled. A brochure for the Ford F-150 lay open on the table between them. "You're buying Noah a $40,000 truck?" My voice came out unnaturally calm. My father recovered first. "We're just looking at options. Noah will need a car soon." A car. Not a brand new luxury truck. I picked up the brochure. The model they were considering had all the premium features: leather seats, touchscreen navigation, premium sound system. "It's not a luxury truck, it's practical," my father defended, "and it would keep him safe." Unlike the used cars you suggested I look at when I turn 16? The ones under $5,000 that you said were perfectly good for a first car? My mother sighed. Jasper, this is different. Noah needs… What? What does Noah need that costs exactly the same amount you said you couldn't afford for my education? The calm was evaporating quickly, replaced by a building anger. Your brother doesn't have your academic abilities, my father said, his voice hardening. He might not get scholarships like you did. We need to support him in other ways. So because I worked hard and earned a scholarship, I deserve less support? The logic was so twisted it made my head spin. And $40,000 for a truck is reasonable. But $40,000 toward my Stanford tuition is impossible? My mother stood up, reaching for my arm. You already have a partial scholarship, honey. And Noah will use this truck for years. I stepped back from her touch. I'll use my education for life. It's my future. You'll succeed wherever you go, my father said dismissively. Noah needs more help than you do. The conversation spiraled from there. My parents brought up their financial concerns again, the same ones they'd used to dismiss Stanford. But now, somehow, there was money for a brand new truck. They talked about different needs for different children and how they had to distribute resources fairly. There was nothing fair about it. As the argument continued, it became increasingly clear that my academic success had somehow worked against me. Because I had good grades, because I had ambition and drive, I was expected to figure things out on my own. Noah, with his average grades and popularity, needed more tangible support. The real punch to the gut came when Noah himself walked in, oblivious to the tension. Dad. Mike's dad just texted him about that truck we saw. The blue one is still available if we want to go look at it today. He noticed me and added casually, Oh, hey Jasper. Did Mom and Dad tell you? I'm getting a new truck. The pride in his voice, the complete lack of awareness about what this meant for me. It was too much. Congratulations, I said flatly. Apparently being a mediocre student has its rewards. Jasper. My mother gasped. Noah looked confused. What's your problem? My problem is that our parents can't afford to help me go to Stanford, but they can buy you a $40,000 truck for your future. I made air quotes with my fingers. Noah's expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness. It's not my fault you want to go to some expensive school across the country, and it's not my fault you've never worked for anything in your life. I shot back. That's enough, my father thundered. Noah, go to your room. Jasper, you need to calm down and be reasonable. Reasonable? I laughed bitterly. Like you were when you promised to help with college if I kept my grades up? Or reasonable like buying a brand new truck for a teenager while telling your other son to lower his expectations? I didn't wait for their response. I stormed out of the house, walking aimlessly through the neighborhood for hours. By the time I returned home, the house was quiet. Noah's baseball gear was gone, probably at practice. My parents had left a note saying they were going to look at cars and would be back for dinner. In my room, I sat at my desk and stared at the Stanford acceptance letter, the beautiful campus, the world-class engineering program, the future I had imagined for myself. It all seemed to be slipping away because of an arbitrary decision my parents had made, not because they couldn't afford to help me, but because they chose not to. That night, I made a decision. I would not give up on my dream of a top-tier education. If Stanford was out of reach, I would find another path. I wouldn't settle for less just because my parents had decided I wasn't worth the investment. The revelation about Noah's truck changed everything. Over the next week, I threw myself into a desperate search for alternatives to Stanford. I contacted every college that had accepted me, explaining my financial situation and asking if they could improve their offers. Most responded with sympathy, but little else. A few offered slight increases to their financial aid packages, but nothing close to what I would need. I began to accept that I might have to defer my dreams and start at community college after all. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, an email arrived from MIT. I had been accepted there too, but had always considered Stanford my first choice. The email was from their financial aid office, responding to my inquiry. "Dear Mr. Jasper Mitchell," it began, "after reviewing your academic record and financial situation, we are pleased to offer you our presidential scholarship, covering full tuition and room and board for 4 years, provided you maintain a 3.5 gigapascals. I read the email 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. A full ride to MIT, one of the most prestigious technical universities in the world. The scholarship even included a stipend for books and a guaranteed research assistant position starting in my sophomore year. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. MIT's engineering program rivaled Stanford's in many areas. The campus was different, the location far from California's sunshine, but the opportunity was incredible. I spent several days weighing my options. Stanford had been my dream for years. Even with my partial scholarship and working multiple jobs, I could potentially make it work through loans and extreme financial sacrifice. But the debt would follow me for decades. MIT was offering me a clean start. No debt. No need to work multiple jobs while studying. A chance to focus entirely on my education. The decision crystallized one evening when I overheard Noah on the phone with a friend, describing the features of his new truck. "Yeah, Dad says, we'll pick it up next Saturday. It's fully loaded, man. Leather seats, premium sound system, the works." That was when I knew. I would accept MIT's offer, and I would do it my way. I spent the next few days carefully planning. I accepted the MIT scholarship online and arranged for my final high school transcripts to be sent directly to them. I researched bus schedules to Boston and calculated exactly how much money I would need for the trip and initial expenses until my stipend kicked in. The timing worked out perfectly. My parents had scheduled a Saturday trip to the Ford dealership to finalize Noah's truck purchase. All 3 of them would be gone for most of the day. The perfect opportunity for me to leave without confrontation. That Saturday morning, I woke up early. My suitcase had been packed for days, hidden in my closet. I had withdrawn my savings from the bank, closed my accounts, and tied up all loose ends. I left my house keys on my desk. As I heard my family moving around downstairs, excited about Noah's truck, I stayed in my room pretending to be asleep. Around 10 a.m., I heard the front door close and the car pull out of the driveway. Only then did I spring into action. I brought my suitcase downstairs, along with a backpack containing my laptop and important documents. In the kitchen, I wrote a brief note and left it on the counter. "I've found a solution for my college education. Don't worry about me anymore, Jasper." No explanation, no dramatics, just a simple statement of fact. As I stood in the entryway of the house I had grown up in, a strange mixture of emotions washed over me. Sadness at what should have been but wasn't. Anger at the unfairness of it all. Fear about the uncertain future. But mostly, determination. I was taking control of my life. I took one last look around, then walked out the door, locking it behind me. The Uber I had scheduled was already waiting at the curb. "Bus station, please," I told the driver, who nodded and pulled away from the house. The bus ride to Boston was long and uncomfortable. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching as familiar landscapes gave way to unknown territory. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from my mother asking where I was, but I didn't respond. They would figure it out soon enough. By nightfall, I had reached Boston. I checked into a cheap hotel near the MIT campus, planning to visit the housing office first thing Monday morning. Sitting on the edge of the bed in that small, anonymous room, the magnitude of what I had done finally hit me. I was alone. Truly alone. No family to fall back on. No safety net if I failed. But also, no one to disappoint. No one to compare me to. No one to make me feel less than. My phone continued to buzz throughout the evening. My parents had returned home and found my note. My mother's messages ranged from confused to angry to pleading. My father called repeatedly, leaving increasingly stern voicemails, demanding I stop this nonsense and come home immediately. After midnight, I finally sent a single text to my mother. I'm safe. I've accepted a full scholarship to MIT. Please respect my decision. Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep in a city where nobody knew my name. The next few days were a blur of administrative tasks. I met with the housing department, who helped me secure a dorm room despite the late notice. I visited the financial aid office to confirm my scholarship details. I attended an impromptu orientation session for late confirming students. Everyone I met was helpful and welcoming. But I kept my story vague. Family circumstances changed. I would say when asked why I was arriving without parents, or why I had decided on MIT so late in the process, my parents continued to call and text. After a few days, I began responding with brief, factual updates. Moved into dorm. Classes start next week. Meeting with academic advisor. Tomorrow. New emotions, new details, new openings for deeper conversation. Noah sent a single text. Mom and Dad are freaking out. What's your problem? I didn't respond to that one. As the initial shock wore off, my parents' approach changed. My mother began sending longer messages, describing her worry, expressing hurt that I had left without saying goodbye. My father's messages became less demanding and more businesslike, asking about practical matters like whether I had enough money or needed my winter clothes shipped. I maintained my distance. I answered direct questions, but volunteered nothing. When they asked if they could visit, I said I was too busy settling in. When they suggested coming for Parents' Weekend in October, I told them I had already made other plans. It wasn't that I never wanted to see them again. It was that I needed this clean break to establish myself on my own terms. I needed to know I could succeed without them, that their support had always been a bonus, not a necessity. And so began my new life at MIT, 300 miles from the family that had determined I wasn't worth investing in, and 3,000 miles from the dream school I had been forced to give up. My first semester at MIT was the hardest adjustment period of my life. Beyond the typical freshman challenges of difficult classes and social transitions, I was dealing with the emotional aftermath of my family situation. There were nights I lay awake, doubting my decision, wondering if I had overreacted, missing the familiar comfort of home despite everything. But there were bright spots that kept me going. My roommate, Tyler, became my first real friend at MIT. He was a computer science major from Seattle, with an easy laugh and seemingly endless supply of energy drinks. When he noticed I never mentioned going home for breaks or receiving care packages like other students, he asked about it directly. Family issues, I said vaguely. We're not really in contact right now. Instead of pushing for details, Tyler simply nodded and said, Well, you're coming home with me for Thanksgiving then. My mom always makes enough food for an army. That simple act of inclusion meant more than he could know. Tyler's family welcomed me without question, treating me like another son. During that first holiday, it was my first glimpse of what family support could look like when it was given freely, without conditions or comparisons. Academically, I threw myself into my coursework with a determination born of necessity. I needed to maintain a 3.5 gigapascals to keep my scholarship, but I set my personal goal much higher. If I was going to prove my parents wrong, I would do it by excelling beyond anyone's expectations. By the end of my first semester, I had the highest grades in 3 of my 5 classes. My principles of engineering professor, Dr. Williams, took notice and invited me to join his research team, a rare opportunity for a freshman. "I don't usually take first years," he told me, "but your work shows unusual maturity and attention to detail." Dr. Williams became another pivotal figure in my MIT journey. More than just a research advisor, he became a mentor who pushed me to challenge myself while providing the guidance I needed to succeed. When I eventually shared some of my family history with him, his response was exactly what I needed to hear. "Sometimes the people who should support us don't," he said simply. "That's their failure, not yours. What matters is what you do with the opportunities in front of you." By sophomore year, I had settled into a routine. Classes, research, study groups, occasional social events with the small circle of close friends I had developed. I worked in the campus library 15 hours a week to cover personal expenses, carefully managing the modest stipend from my scholarship. I learned to budget, to distinguish between needs and wants, to find joy in small pleasures rather than material things. While other students ordered takeout regularly, I taught myself to cook simple, affordable meals in the dorm kitchen. When friends went on expensive spring break trips, I stayed on campus to work on research projects. These weren't hardships. They were choices that gave me independence. Every dollar I saved, every achievement I earned entirely on my own merit, reinforced that I was capable of building a life without my parents' support. Contact with my family remained minimal during these years. I sent birthday and Christmas cards with brief, polite messages. I responded to direct questions in texts, but rarely initiated contact. When my mother sent care packages, I accepted them with a short thank you text, but never mentioned needing anything specific. During my second year, I received a message from Noah that surprised me. "Got into State University," it read. "No scholarship, though. Using my truck to commute from home to save money." I wasn't sure if it was an olive branch or if he was simply sharing news, but I responded with a simple, "Congratulations. Good luck with your studies." The summer after sophomore year marked another milestone in my independence. I secured a prestigious internship at a technology company in California, ironically not far from Stanford. The position paid well enough that I returned for junior year with a financial cushion I had never had before. That fall, during a rare phone call with my mother, she mentioned casually, "Your father had to help Noah with some repairs on his truck. Those things sure are expensive to maintain." I could have pointed out the irony, could have said I told you so. Instead, I simply changed the subject. Their choices were no longer my concern, just as my life was no longer their responsibility. Junior year brought new challenges and opportunities. I was accepted into an accelerated master's program that would allow me to earn both my bachelor's and master's degrees in a total of 5 years. My research with Dr. Williams resulted in co-authorship on a paper published in a respected engineering journal. I also began dating Allison, a brilliant architecture student who approached life with a creativity and warmth that balanced my more analytical nature. She came from a close-knit family and couldn't quite understand my estrangement from mine. But she respected my boundaries and never pushed me to reconcile before I was ready. Families are complicated, she said once. "You'll know when or if the time is right to rebuild those bridges." By senior year, I had exceeded even my own expectations. I was in the top 5% of my class academically. My research was gaining attention in the field. I had secured another summer internship, this time with a significant salary increase and the promise of a job offer after graduation. As the end of my undergraduate career approached, I found myself thinking more about my family. The acute pain of their rejection had dulled over time, replaced by a more complex mix of emotions. I still felt the injustice of what had happened, but I also recognized that I had built a good life because of, not despite, the path I had been forced to take. My success wasn't a perfect revenge fantasy. My parents hadn't fallen on hard times. Noah hadn't failed out of college. As far as I could tell from our limited communications, they were continuing their lives much as before. The difference was that I was no longer measuring my worth by their validation or lack thereof. In February of senior year, graduation announcements went out. Each student received a limited number of tickets for the ceremony. I stared at mine for a long time, contemplating whether to send any to my family. In the end, I decided not to. The day would be emotional enough, without adding the uncertainty of their presence. Instead, I gave my extra tickets to Tyler, whose parents had become something of a surrogate family to me, and to Dr. Williams, whose mentorship had been so crucial to my development. As graduation approached, my mother's messages became more frequent. "We're so proud of you," she wrote. "Please let us come to your graduation. We want to celebrate with you." I left these messages unanswered. Part of me wanted to believe they were genuinely proud, that they recognized the magnitude of what I had accomplished on my own. But another part remained wary. Had they really changed? Or did they simply want to claim credit for my success now that it was assured? The week before graduation, I made a decision. I wouldn't invite them, but I also wouldn't explicitly forbid them from coming. MIT's graduation was a public event in many ways. If they chose to attend, they would do so without any guarantee of finding me among thousands of graduates. What I didn't expect was just how determined my mother would be to find me, or the dramatic way our reunion would ultimately unfold. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, a perfect New England spring morning. I woke early, too anxious to sleep, despite having stayed up late, celebrating with friends the night before. This was it, the culmination of 4 years of hard work, independence, and personal growth. My apartment near campus was quiet. My roommates had already left to meet their families for pre-ceremony breakfasts. I took my time getting ready, carefully ironing my shirt and pants, polishing my dress shoes to a perfect shine. The red and gray graduation gown hung on my closet door, along with the gold honor cords I had earned through my academic performance. As I dressed, I tried to focus on pride, rather than the lingering sense of something missing. This was supposed to be a day shared with family, yet I had chosen to experience it alone. I reminded myself that it was also a day earned entirely through my own efforts, and there was a different kind of satisfaction in that. The MIT graduation ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the university's main court. I had arranged to meet Tyler and his parents at 9:15 near the engineering building, along with our other friends and their families for photos. The campus was transformed that morning. Everywhere I looked, I saw proud parents helping adjust caps, taking photos, hugging their graduating children. Younger siblings ran around excitedly, while grandparents watched from benches with misty eyes. The atmosphere was electric, with joy and anticipation. Tyler's family greeted me with warm hugs. "We're so proud of you, Jasper," his mother said, straightening my honor cords. What you've accomplished here is remarkable. We took dozens of photos in various combinations. Just the graduates, graduates with families, silly poses with our engineering friends. I smiled genuinely in each one, grateful for these connections that had sustained me through my time at MIT. Around 9:40, we began making our way toward the main ceremony area. Graduates were supposed to line up by department, so I separated from Tyler's family with a final hug and promised to meet afterward. As I walked toward the engineering section, I heard a familiar voice that stopped me in my tracks. A voice I hadn't heard in person for 4 years. "Please, he's my son. I need to find him before the ceremony." I turned slowly toward the sound. Near the administration tent stood my mother, looking older than I remembered. Her hair had more gray, and lines of worry creased her face. She was speaking urgently to an older man I recognized as Dean Hoffman from the School of Engineering. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Mitchell," the dean was saying patiently, "but I cannot give out information about a student's whereabouts, even to parents. If your son wanted you to attend, he would have been in contact about where to meet." "You don't understand," my mother pleaded, her voice cracking. "We haven't seen him in 4 years. Not since he left for MIT. He won't answer our calls about graduation. We just want to see him graduate, to tell him how sorry we are, how proud." She trailed off as she noticed the dean's eyes shift to something. Someone behind her. Me, standing 20 feet away in my cap and gown, honor cords gleaming against the red fabric. My mother turned slowly, her hand flying to her mouth as she saw me. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, 4 years of separation stretching between us, like an unbridgeable chasm. Then I noticed my father standing a few feet behind her, looking simultaneously older and smaller than I remembered, and beside him, Noah, now a young man of 21, awkwardly shifting his weight from foot to foot. Time seemed to suspend as we regarded each other. Students and families continued to flow around us, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. The dean, sensing the tension, quietly excused himself. My mother was the first to move, taking a hesitant step toward me. "Jasper," she said, my name coming out like a prayer. You look so grown up." I remained where I was, not advancing but not retreating either. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "We couldn't miss your graduation," my father said, stepping forward. "We're your parents." Something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. "Are you? That's not the role you chose 4 years ago." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We made a terrible mistake, Jasper. We've regretted it every day since you left. We tried to contact you," my father added. "You never gave us a chance to make it right." "Make it right?" I repeated, feeling years of suppressed emotion rising to the surface. "You told me you couldn't afford to help me attend the school I had worked toward for years, then bought Noah a brand new truck the same month. What exactly would making it right have looked like?" Noah spoke up then, his voice deeper than I remembered. "I didn't know, Jasper. About Stanford. About what happened. Not until after you left." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. He seemed uncomfortable in his button-up shirt and khaki pants, so different from the confident, carefree teenager I remembered. There was something like shame in his expression. "I sold the truck last year," he added quietly. It felt wrong to keep it. A moment of silence followed this revelation. Around us, the crowd was beginning to thin as graduates moved toward their designated areas. You should go, my mother said suddenly, noticing the time. You'll miss lining up. We can talk after the ceremony. It was such a normal, maternal concern, worry about me being late, that it momentarily threw me. Before I could respond, a voice called out over the loudspeaker, "All graduates, please proceed to your designated areas. The ceremony will begin in 15 minutes. We'll find seats," my father said. "We'll be watching for you." I nodded stiffly, then turned to go. As I walked away, my mother called after me, "Jasper, we're so proud of you. So incredibly proud." I didn't turn back, but I felt something shift inside me at those words. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the first crack in a wall I had built 4 years ago. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. I walked across the stage when my name was called, accepted my diploma with a firm handshake from the university president. Jasper Mitchell, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, summa cum laude, the announcer read. And, somewhere in the audience, I heard a distinct cheer that could only have been my family. After the ceremony ended and caps had been thrown into the air, graduates dispersed to find their families among the crowd. I stood still, scanning faces, until I spotted them waiting at the edge of the main lawn. As I approached, I could see they were nervous. My mother clutched her purse with white knuckles. My father stood unnaturally straight. Noah hung back slightly, uncertain of his place in this reunion. "Congratulations, Jasper," my father said formally, extending his hand. I hesitated, only briefly, before shaking it. "Thank you," I replied, then added, "all of you, for coming. We wouldn't have missed it," my mother said. "Not for anything." An awkward silence followed. 4 years of absence impossible to bridge with casual conversation. "So," Noah finally said, "MIT, huh? Pretty impressive." A small smile tugged at my lips despite myself. "Yeah, it worked out. Better than worked out." My father interjected. "The dean told us you're graduating top of your class. And you already have a job lined up?" I nodded. "At Axiom Technologies in Boston. I start next month." 6 figures, my mother said, not as a question but with a note of pride. The dean mentioned that too. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to point out that my salary shouldn't be the measure of my worth, that they should have supported me regardless of my earning potential. But another part recognized the pride behind her words, however awkwardly expressed. "There's a coffee shop near campus," I said finally. "If you want to sit down somewhere quieter." The relief on their faces was palpable. As we walked toward the cafe, Tyler passed by with his parents. He gave me a questioning look, clearly recognizing my family from photos he'd seen. I nodded slightly to let him know I was okay, and he continued on with a supportive smile. The graduation coordinator approached just then, asking me to gather with the other honor graduates for an additional photo. "I'll meet you at the coffee shop," I told my family. "It's called Voltage, just 2 blocks that way." I pointed down the street. "We'll be there," my mother assured me, and for the first time that day, I believed they would. The coffee shop was busy with other graduation parties, but we managed to find a table in the corner. My parents and Noah had already ordered drinks and were waiting when I arrived after the honor graduates photo session. An awkward silence fell as I sat down. 4 years of separation had left us as strangers in many ways. Where did one even begin to bridge such a gap? "So," my father finally said, clearing his throat, "we owe you an explanation and an apology." I sipped my coffee, waiting. Part of me had been waiting for this moment for 4 years. Another part had given up, expecting it would ever come. "What happened with Stanford?" my mother began. her voice unsteady. We made a terrible mistake. Jasper, there's no excuse for how we handled it. My father nodded. I told myself it was about finances, but that wasn't the whole truth. When Noah wanted that truck, we found a way to make it work. We should have done the same for your education. Why didn't you? I asked directly, the question I'd carried for 4 years. My parents exchanged glances. Part of it was exactly what you thought, my father admitted. We took your success for granted. You were always so capable, so independent. We didn't think you needed us the way Noah did. That's not fair, Noah interrupted, surprising me. Don't use me as an excuse. You guys played favorites, and we all know it. I looked at my brother with new respect. The Noah I remembered would never have spoken to our parents that way, would never have acknowledged the imbalance in how we were treated. You're right, my mother said softly. It wasn't fair. There were financial concerns, my father added. But nothing we couldn't have figured out if we'd prioritized differently. The truth is, we failed you, Jasper. And by the time we realized how badly we'd messed up, you were gone. I took a deep breath. I couldn't stay. Not after seeing the truck. Not after realizing what it meant about how you valued me versus Noah. I hated that truck, Noah said suddenly. After I understood why you left, every time I drove it, I thought about how it cost me my brother. The raw emotion in his voice caught me off guard. In my mind, Noah had been a willing participant in our parents' favoritism, happy to reap the benefits without questioning the cost. What happened after I left? I asked, genuinely curious for the first time about the life I'd walked away from. My mother described how they'd come home from the dealership to find my note, how they'd called every hospital, checked with all my friends, finally calling the MIT admissions office in desperation. How the school would only confirm I was enrolled, nothing more. We tried to visit that first parents' weekend, my father said, but you never responded to our messages about where to meet you. I wasn't ready, I said simply. My mother nodded. We understood that, eventually, but we never stopped trying to reach out. Even when you barely responded. Noah shared that he'd started at State University, living at home to save money. The truck started having problems in my sophomore year. Expensive repairs. One after another. Dad said it was a lesson in the hidden costs of luxury items. He gave a wry smile. I sold it and bought a used Civic last year. Much more practical. It was strange to hear about the life I'd missed, the small evolutions in my family during my absence. Noah had matured, taking responsibility for his education in a way I hadn't expected. My parents seemed humbled, the confident authority they'd always projected now tempered with uncertainty. Tell us about MIT, my father said. We want to hear everything. So I did. I told them about the challenges of that first year, the difficult classes, the loneliness, the struggle to build a life from scratch. I shared stories about Tyler and his family's kindness, about Dr. Williams' mentorship, about the research that had become my passion. I described my internships, my growing confidence, my gradual understanding that I could succeed on my own terms. I told them about Allison, about our relationship, and her encouragement as I worked through my family issues. You've built an amazing life, my mother said, tears in her eyes, without any help from us. Not entirely without help, I corrected. I had scholarships, mentors, friends. I was never completely alone. But not your family, my father said quietly. Not when it mattered most. I considered this. No, I agreed. Not my family. Can we try to be that for you now? Noah asked. Or, Is it too late? The question hung in the air between us. 4 years ago, I would have instantly dismissed the possibility. The hurt had been too fresh. The betrayal, too complete. But now, sitting across from them as an independent adult with my own life and accomplishments, I found the anger had largely burned away, leaving complicated but no longer overwhelming emotions in its place. I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm not the same person who left home 4 years ago. I don't know if we can build something new. But I'm willing to try, if you understand it has to be different. Different how? My father asked. Equal, I said firmly. No favorites. No different standards. And with the understanding that I've built my own life now. I make my own decisions. My mother nodded eagerly. Of course. Anything. And I need you to understand something else, I continued. I'm glad things happened this way. Their expressions registered surprise. Not the hurt, I clarified. Not the feeling that my own parents valued me less than my brother. But what came after? Having to make it entirely on my own taught me I'm stronger than I ever knew. I would never have chosen this path, but I'm proud of the person it made me. As you should be, my father said, a hint of the old pride in his voice, but tempered now with something like respect. As our conversation continued, I invited them to see my apartment before they returned home. I suggested they might visit again when I started my new job. See my new place once I moved. Small steps toward rebuilding a relationship on new terms. When we finally left the coffee shop, the afternoon sun was beginning to lower in the sky. We stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, the moment of goodbye approaching. Can I hug you? My mother asked hesitantly. I nodded, allowing her to embrace me for the first time in 4 years. Her familiar perfume brought back memories both good and painful. My father shook my hand again, then pulled me into a brief, stiff hug. We're proud of you, son. Not because of MIT or your job offer, because of who you are. Noah was last, approaching me with uncertainty. I never wanted things to be unequal between us, he said quietly. I just didn't know how to fix it. I know that now, I replied, offering my hand. He ignored it and hugged me instead. As I watched them walk toward their hotel, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The wounds hadn't magically healed in one afternoon conversation. Trust would take time to rebuild, if it ever fully could be. But something had shifted, allowing space for a new kind of relationship to potentially grow. Back in my apartment, I looked out the window at the MIT campus where I had rebuilt my life. In 2 weeks, I would start my position at Axiom Technologies. My future stretched before me, full of possibilities I had created for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. So proud of the man you've become. Thank you for giving us a chance to know him. I smiled slightly as I read it. The journey of healing had only just begun, but for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace about my family. Not because they had changed completely, or because I had forgotten the past, but because I now understood my own worth wasn't dependent on their validation. Sometimes, the most valuable lessons come from our deepest wounds. Sometimes, being forced to stand alone is what teaches us how strong we truly are. And sometimes, the doors that close behind us lead to opportunities we never would have found otherwise. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a significant disappointment? What gave you the strength to move forward? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember to like this video if you found my story meaningful, and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' treatment of you, but by the courage you show in the face of adversity.